Manet once said, "Look for grand light and grand shadow. The rest will come of itself." And often it doesn't amount to much anyway. Edouard Manet was one of the first painters of modern urban life, if not the first. But it's said that he is very difficult to pigeonhole. Considered by many to be the leader of the impressionist movement, it is argued, strictly speaking, he was not an impressionist painter. Unlike his younger followers, he relied on the Salon's verdict on his work as a measure of his worth, whereas the impressionists mainly shunned the establishment. And unlike them, he used black to a large extent, while they deliberately omitted it from their palettes. There's no doubt his technical skill was assured, and yet on occasions he deliberately broke the rules of perspective, as we shall see. He was derivative at times too, and left himself open to criticism that too many of his paintings had the appearance of being sketchy and unfinished. But for all that, Manet's paintings pleased and still please today. In 2014, the Getty Museum paid a record $65 million for Manet's painting Spring. And there it is, $65 million worth. It's quite a small painting actually, 29 by 20 inches, as you can see. Manet was born in Paris in 1832 into an affluent family living in a mansion. His mother was a goddaughter of the Swedish crown prince. His father was an eminent judge, and not unsurprisingly, Manet was expected to follow him into the law. Fortunately for the art world, his uncle, Edmond Fournier, encouraged him to pursue painting as a career and introduced him to the Louvre. On the advice of his uncle, at the age of 13, he enrolled in a special course of drawing there. Yet 3 years later, prompted by his father, he sailed on a training vessel to Rio de Janeiro. Having twice failed his examination to join the Navy, however, his father gave in. And from 1850 to 56, Manet studied under the painter Thomas Couture while copying old masters in the Louvre. Couture, however, came to resent the rise of his brilliant pupil. Manet was a man about town, an elegant flaneur, according to Zola, his lifelong friend. I say lifelong, they did fall out at one stage, just as Zola fell out with Cézanne, but that's another story. We are told he had charm, was something of a ladies' man, and walked with a swagger. He was exceptionally cultivated and well-read, a left-wing Republican, and no supporter of Emperor Napoleon III. Yet when Napoleon married a Spanish bride, Manet embraced all things Spanish. As a consequence, he particularly fell under the influence of Velázquez. His first submission to the Salon, Le Buveur d'Absinthe, was rejected, and Couture hated it. It caused Manet to break with his studio. So there we are. There's the first painting for this morning for us to look at. Rather somber painting using dull colors, as you can see. The bottle on the empty bottle on the floor there, and the glass of absinthe to his right. He's wrapped in some sort of a shawl. And then the background, and we should see this not in Manet, is basically just a wash of burnt umber or a dark brown color. The following year, he painted his parents, Monsieur and Madame Auguste Manet. I'll just let you look at that for a minute. I don't have too much to say about that. It's fairly self-evident portrait there, though it's curious that they're both looking down. They're neither of them are looking at the artist. They seem to be transfixed on something down here, but it's not clear what. Maybe he's emphasizing the fact that they were quiet people, their own people. However, having said that, we know they were from elated background, he being an eminent judge. However, his second submission, The Spanish Singer, in 1860, won him a medal in the Salon and was well received by the critics. The elimination of half-tones was innovative, and a harsh flat light created a stark realism. So again, we've got the brown background then, burnt umber background, and the figure is contrasted against it. It makes the figure stand out extremely well, as you can see. Manet was very good at still life as well, and we've got a little still life at the bottom there of a flagon of whatever substance, wine I suppose, and a couple of onions there. He's quite animated. The singer is kind of animated as you'd expect him to be. He's halfway through a Spanish song, and he looks he's been painted very, very well indeed. He looks as though he's actually playing that instrument, but quite what his leg is doing in the air, I don't know. But it's Manet's court movement with colour there, I think. So he's well on his way to entertaining whoever he's entertaining. Gypsy with a Cigarette followed in 1862. Mallarmé, the poet and close friend, said at the time that Manet hurled himself on his bare canvas with a rush as if he had never painted before. Now, although it's said that by many that Manet was not an impressionist painter, I think you'll all agree that there's quite an element of impressionism in this painting. There's nothing painted in detail, particularly the horse's head in the background, or the clothing that the Spanish girl is wearing. It's all done with quick strokes, no detail in the creases, but it works, doesn't it? And the color, the chrome yellow color of her chemise is stark against this rather dull red of her dress there, and he's caught her in a sort of I know, well, she's smoking a cigarette for one thing, and she's very casually leaning against something, we're not quite sure what, propping her head up and not looking at the viewer. So, well, we caught her mid-reverie maybe. Then we have Lola de Valence, again another Spanish subject, painted with more detail in mind, rather except the background, which you're not quite sure what the background is. It looks to be some sort of wooden door that's heavily reinforced with iron bars maybe, or they could just be wooden supports or some sort of wooden fretwork structure. I don't know. It's not clear, but there's not much detail given to it. But on the other hand, that contrasts heavily with the actual figure, Lola. I mean, her dress is a mass of detail, very colourful, as you can see, as is her headdress. And I like the way the blue, this little blue here, part of her dress, could be a scarf, I don't know, is picked up with the tassel on the fan. And she's painted he's given her legs a sort of ballet dancer's pose, I would say. Now, it's said that he took the inspiration for her pose from Goya's Duchess of Alba. And there they are side by side. And yes, I suppose we can see that it's sort of the same sort of pose. The arms are in the same sort of position, but the feet certainly aren't. So I'll leave you to decide whether you think that is a fair comment or not. Sorry, went too far then. Go back to, right, okay. In 1862, Manet embarked on an ambitious series of paintings, beginning with The Old Musician. The various casually placed figures reveal Manet's weakness for composition and also appear derivative of other paintings. For instance, this character here is very reminiscent of Watteau's Gilles, as you can see there. And the absinthe drinker, the buveur d'absinthe that we saw, the very first painting we saw, well, surely he's here again, isn't he? Almost completely reproduced. The colour's slightly different of his trousers maybe, but surely it's exactly the same figure. So we go back to the original painting, and so why he's criticised for his composition is he simply lined up the audience, the musicians' audience. He simply lined them up. In fact, this young lad here looks to be totally uninterested in what's going on, as though he's just been dragged along by his mate there. Still under the influence of Spain, in the same year he painted the Spanish ballet. Now I've actually left that out because it's a very poor reproduction. Oh no, I haven't put it in. Sorry, I intended to leave it out. I didn't think the reproduction was the Google reproduction was very good, but it doesn't look too bad now actually. So that's the Spanish ballet. Again, it's done not a lot of detail in the figures, especially the guitar player down there and the guitar player either side, which are sort of framing the painting. These are the two dancers, and this reminds us of Lola de Valence that we just saw. She's sitting down, waiting to dance, presumably. And the background, again, very dark, very brown, and just a suggestion of figures over there. His model at this time was Victorine Morin. She had already posed for him in The Surprised Nymph, 1861. And we shall see her again posing for both nudes in the famous painting Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe. So I've just included that painting because of the model more than anything else. I don't think there's much else to say about it. I'm not quite sure what's going on, where she's sitting. She's sitting on sort of, it looks to me like a heap of clothing, but obviously it isn't. But it's painted quickly and dare I say it, carelessly, as is the rest of it really. It is so the tension is transfixed on the nymph, on the surprised nymph. Another of his ambitious canvases in that year is Music in the Tuileries Gardens. This picture of modern society at play perhaps gave Renoir his inspiration for Dance at Moulin de la Galette some 13 years later, which is that one. You'll remember that, no doubt. So you can see the comparison there. It's just an attempt to paint a lot of people in a small space. Let's go back to the music. The quick strokes, almost slapdash manner in which it was painted, pointed towards the impressionistic style, which was shortly to come into being. But the art world wasn't quite ready for that yet. So it was heavily criticized at the time. I like the way the top hats are mirrored in the trunks of the trees. Various top hats. The painting is a bit unbalanced in so much as our focus is immediately drawn to these ladies sitting on these chairs there. This little girl seems to me too small, and maybe this one too, in comparison to them. But it's well, the Parisian society just didn't like the mirror being held up to itself for whatever reason. By studying Japanese prints, Manet went on to employ flat, bold colour. This one is called The Street Singer, painted in the in the same highly productive year of 1862. It's painted almost naively in drab colours with a touch of pathos, perhaps. The clothes are almost two-dimensional. She's depicted leaving the cabaret at night, clutching her guitar and eating cherries. We're told they're cherries. It's not very obvious to me what they are. It's based on an actual encounter with the singer, but the singer refused to pose for him, so he used Victorine Morin again, as you can see from the likeness, I suppose. Rather drab colours, again the brown backgrounds, making sure that the figure herself is highlighted, and these heavy black lines, they almost give the impression of it being a print in a way. They're not particularly subtle, are they? But he just emphasizing the contrast, so he's making the figure stand out. Manet actually was a keen photographer, and he could see no point in reproducing reality as it is seen. Of course, photography was just nascent at the time. The camera, of course, reproduces reality. There was no point in artists doing it as well. He saw that very early on. Degas, equally so. Indeed, both Degas and Manet painted from photographs. In the same year, no, it's not the same year, sorry, 4 years later, he painted The Piper, which hangs in the Louvre. It's largely two-dimensional, again, painted in flat colours against a plain tone background. This time it's a light background as opposed to a brown one. It seems to work particularly well with the very dark black, could be dark brown, tunic that the piper is wearing, and the red trousers. Again, the heavy, although this is of stripe, obviously down his trousers and on this side as well. I'm not sure whether we would actually see that stripe on that side of his trousers, but it just enforces the print-like quality of this painting. I think it's quite a large painting as well, and he just over 5 foot by a meter wide. It's a strong, bold example of chiaroscuro painting, I suppose, except that, not, as I said, not a dark background, but a light background. But nevertheless, we've got a very stark contrast. And now we come to one of Manet's most celebrated works, Le Déjeuner sous l'herbe, painted in 1863. This hangs in the D'Orsay, as you can see. Manet based this painting on Titian's Pastoral Concert, giving it a modern context. Now, this is Titian's Pastoral Concert, painted in 1509, although some claim Giorgione actually painted it, but I think common consent has given it to Titian now. So we've got the 2 nude women and the 2 fully clothed men, and this was what was so controversial about Le Déjeuner, the fact that the women were naked and the men were fully clothed, which might seem a bit illogical. The Salon famously rejected it, along with 4,000 other works by artists who are now household names. It was then exhibited in the Salon des Refusés, instituted by the emperor to appease public dissatisfaction with the harsh appraisal of the Salon. There, this painting attracted even more opprobrium. The public found its concept hard to take. As I said, a naked woman sitting alongside 2 fully clothed men, painted mainly in black. And as I've already made reference to the fact that Manet wasn't afraid to use black. And then there's another bathing in the pool after who knows what exertion. Manet has made no attempt to clothe the painting in mythology. And this was perhaps one aspect of modern Parisian life the public didn't care to have thrust in their faces. The light is cool, the shadows harsh, the subject matter frank. And it's also said the woman in the pool is too large for conventional perspective. In fact, some pedants have suggested that she's actually 10 foot tall to be that large in the painting. I don't know how they arrive at that. And I have to say, it's only recently that I realized, and I've seen this painting many times, it's only recently that I realized that she is painted too large, given that she's several meters away from them in that pool. I don't think it matters too much from the point of view of the composition of the painting. There, the three characters, the four characters are hold center stage. There's a boat there in the pool, and then the rest of the woodland, the shaded area, is painted with rather quick strokes again. The foliage is dabbed on green with a brush. It's just dabbed on. No attempt to do anything other than giving an impression of the trees and foliage. There's a very nice still life down here. The remnants of their picnic interposed with her clothing, of course. What else have we got? Now, Victorine is not a Victorine, modelled for both those nudes, we're told. The dark green and cerulean blue don't really work, and perhaps the seated woman's flesh is a little too brightly painted, but for public taste. But of course, we know that Manet does like heavy contrast. Manet must have known it would be controversial. Victorine has posed for both women, as they say. In private, he later referred to the painting as la partie carrée, which can be translated in the vernacular as wife swapping. I'll leave you with that thought while we move on to the next controversial painting, Olympia. He also submitted to the Salon in the same year this even more controversial work, Olympia. Again, Manet turned to Titian for his template, and the Titian's Venus of Urbino, another courtesan waiting for customers. But Manet hadn't painted a goddess. He painted a common whore about to entertain a customer. Note the punter's flowers, which she seems to be disdainful of, and the maid, sort of the look on the maid's face suggests that she's horrified that that Olympia isn't taking more notice of them. The painting was similarly rejected and also ended up in the Salon des Refusés, where two ushers, we're told, were employed to prevent the picture being damaged by pointing canes. So it must have been hung low on the wall. Parisian society considered the painting scandalous. The naked courtesan's uncompromising, provocative stare at the viewer, as if saying, "This is what I am, this is what I do, live with it," was hard for them to take. Manet replaced Titian's sleeping dog, and I'll go back to the Titian, there's a sleeping dog there, with the black cat. In fact, it's said that it was added later on, and it's not just a black cat, it's a black cat with his or her hackles up, a black cat with attitude, I would say. And of course, it complements the maid's black flesh. Yet the painting ultimately did his reputation no harm. Degas commented, "Now you're as famous as Garibaldi." And in 1932, Léon Daudet wrote of it, "Described as unspeakable filth, it has now calmly taken its place among the most beautiful pictures in the world." It was generally considered also that the still life elements of both paintings, the basket and the clothes in Le Déjeuner and the bouquet in Olympia, were masterfully painted. And he did paint still lifes. well. This one is still life with fish. Again, very, very strong contrast. The brown background there, and you can't tell me that this copper utensil doesn't suggest impressionist painting. The way it's done, very quickly, quick strokes, no attempt to actually make the burnish looking particularly convincing, just done very quickly. And again, the outline, the dark outlines of the fish to make it stand out. I also painted in '64 a vase of peonies, but he's painted them because as the flowers are going over, as you can see the petals on the floor there. And again, you can't tell me that isn't, in essence, an impressionist painting. To escape the flak his two famous paintings were attracting, Manet fled to Spain and rediscovered Velázquez. Upon his return, he told Baudelaire, "At last, dear friend, I know Velázquez, and I tell you that he is the greatest painter who ever lived." Inspired by what he had seen in Madrid, he produced a matador saluting. There's a very similar painting, I think, to the Piper, in so much as it's almost got the quality of a print, such as the contrast with the dark background and the brightly lit matador. He's saluting the crowd, presumably, on his way to fight a bull, one would suggest. Then he painted the dead toreador, which seems to me a strange subject for a painting. Presumably, the toreador didn't come off well in his tussle with the bull. You just got a suggestion of blood there on the floor. Quite a large painting as well, 5 foot by just under 3 foot, as you can see. Upon his return, he began to experiment with colour in movement. This is the Races at Longchamp, painted in 1863. I'll leave you to look at that for a moment. Again, painted with dark colours for contrast, dark and bright colours for contrast, but with quick strokes in an impressionist style, I would say. And the 6 horses there, the focus of the painting, are galloping away towards the easel. And you certainly get an essence of speed that they're, I would want to get out of their way pretty quick, I think. There's no attempt at any sort of detail of the crowd. They're just created by quick strokes of the brush. He also painted in '67 the World Fair, which was held in Paris that year. And this composition is somewhat improved, I think, from the old musician painting. He hasn't lined his people up. They're doing various things. Those two with their backs to us, and this guy walking the dog, lady on a horse there. There's a couple there looking out over the fair. And they're not quite sure what this guy is doing or even where he is, but I think he's in some sort of a pond, I would think, cultivated pond. To that end, he also embraced contemporary events like the American Civil War's Battle of the Kearsarge and the Alabama. Now, this was although it's the American Civil War, and the one ship, the Alabama, is fighting for the South, and the Kearsarge for the Union. It was actually fought. This battle was actually fought off the coast of France, close to Cherbourg. I've got no details as to why they come to blows there, but it's quite an impressive painting. This ship, we are told, is the Alabama, who came off worse in the tussle. The kearsage, if that is how you pronounce it, is just suggested in the rear there, just amongst all the smoke and debris. We wouldn't have been able to pick it out if we hadn't been told that. Then we got some sort of debris in the ocean there, and this boat, I don't know whether this boat is going to or coming away. A sailor would be able to tell me which way he was going, but I'm no sailor, so I can't tell you. But I dare say by the way his sails are deployed, you would be able to tell that. I like the dark greens that he's used in the waves there, and I think they contrast well with these sort of Payne's grey and wash of smoke that is put in the clouds. This is a more problematic painting, but I'm sure most of you will be familiar with it. The execution of the Emperor Maximilian. There's a problem with perspective again here, I think. For my money, the execution squad, the firing squad, is standing far too close to the three recipients of their bullets, for want of a better word. Only this character here seems to have been hit by the bullets. Maximilian looks remarkably composed there. And then when you look at the guns, surely they're shooting past the three anyway. So an ambitious painting to get all this onto one canvas. It's a very large painting, as you can see, 99 inches, or 100 inches, you might as well say, by 120 inches. So it's an extremely large painting. And these characters on the wall, they look to be children, possibly. They remind me of some of Goya's grotesque faces that he was very good at painting. Not surprisingly, Napoleon forbade the exhibition of this painting. Manet's one-man show the same year was, however, a disaster. The Salon repeatedly rejected his submissions, and the press and Parisian public became even more vituperative about his work. Manet's morale would have all but collapsed, but for the support of his friends, led by the painter Berthe Morisot. That's Berthe Morisot there on the balcony. The self-styled leader of Manet's gang, La Bande à Manet, which effectively and very quickly morphed into the impressionist movement. This painting is called the balcony, as you can see, and it seems to encapsulate Manet's situation at the time among his friends. Berthe Morisot, of course, was a wonderful painter, an impressionist painter in her own right. And she's seen leaning against the balcony here. The gentleman behind her, looking very, very pleased with himself, is Jean-Baptiste Guimet, a painter himself. And on the right, we're told, this is Fanny Klaus, a violinist. It's said that Manet had no desire for this leadership, but the young impressionist painters of the day, in adoration of Olympia, together with unrelenting criticism of the establishment, settled him as their standard bearer. Though sympathetic, Manet tried to keep himself aloof from the movement. Difficult, because many were his friends, of course: Renoir, Monet, Pissarro, Sisley, Basile, Degas, and Morisot herself. What appealed to them was that he painted modern reality in bright colours with quick strokes of the brush. Plus, they are readily identified with his contempt for the salon, even though he kept showing there. This is perhaps what unified the Impressionists as much as anything else, given that their paintings were in many ways quite diverse. Morisot, perhaps their chief whipper-in, was happy to pose for Manet. A very famous painting of Morisot, Berthe Morisot there with violets. In case you're wondering where the violets are, they're there. No hesitancy in using black, or very, very dark Prussian blue, maybe, but mainly black, weakened by touches of white here and there. Morisot was a very good-looking woman, as you can see, and that makes this painting particularly outstanding. He also painted her with a fan, and there you can see her again and again, very dark. Perhaps she liked to wear dark clothes. I'm not sure about that. Somebody could perhaps look that up sometime. And the background, of course, just sketched in with quick strokes, just a suggestion of some sort of plant there, and also a suggestion of the chaise longue or sofa or whatever ottoman, whatever she's sitting on. Right, where do we go from there? Without Manet's financial support, Monet and Renoir may well have starved, we're told. He in fact sold little himself, but what he did sell achieved good prices. This one, Lunch at the Studio, fetched 1,500 francs at the time. And after a visit to Holland in 1872, he painted Le Bon Bock, which fetched 4 times that amount, 6,000 francs. So let's just go back to the Lunch at the Studio. Notice the military wear here. I don't know what significance that is. And again, we've got the still life, his ability to paint still life well, the remnants of their meal there. And this looks like an aspidestra maybe. But the main focus of the painting really is this gentleman here. I'm not sure who he is, though I think we've been told they're Manet's friends, but not necessarily distinguished friends maybe. And then this is a wonderful painting, I think, Le Bon Bock. It's a genre painting, and not surprisingly, the inspiration came from the Netherlands for this. He's what, 1/3 of the way down his pint there, I would say, smoking on his pipe. His face absolutely full of character, and this time his clothing is painted in somber tones as well, so that it's only really his face and his hands that stand out from the painting. The latter, the Bon Bock, Le Bon Bock, did well at the Salon too, and it marked a turning point where he began to direct his attention towards the gaiety of Paris in the Third Republic. In 1873, he painted the railway. It's actually the Gare Saint-Lazare, and this was the last painting in which he used his favorite model, Victorine Morin. So there she is, the model who posed in the Déjeuner sur l'Herbe, and that's the last time he used her. We're not sure the little, well, mother and daughter, I would imagine, or auntie and niece maybe. Could even be older sister and younger sister, I don't know. There's not much detail of the station there. It's mainly the smoke coming from the steam engines, we can see. And then we've got this bard of these bars. So he's put the two characters on the other side of the bars so that they're nice and safe there, looking down on the station. And a nice quick sketch of a little dog there, cradled in the arms of the woman. And she's reading a book, but she's been disturbed from reading her book, and she's now looking up at the artist. Whereas you think the more inquisitive girl would be painted with a face to the artist, but not so. On the beach, which features his brother Eugene, and there's Eugene, and by the way, Eugene married Beth Morisot. This is definitely impressionist in style, isn't it? Done very quickly. I'll leave you to look at that for a moment. No attempt to paint in any detail of the boats, but they work very well. We get the impression of them sailing by there, and the ripples on the water. The sand is just suggested. And the lady, if you look hard enough, you can see she's looking down at a letter maybe, or it could be a book. We don't know. I like the way her shoe sticks out from her dress there. But again, painted very quickly, maybe painted outside en plein air. We don't know. It may be said that Manet was only an impressionist painter to the extent that under the influence of Monet and Renoir, he began to use a lighter palette and painted en plein air scenes using stippled or broken brushstrokes. Well, he'd been using those all along, as you've already seen. This painting is called Argenteuil. It's quite a large painting, 5 foot tall. A lot of colour in this painting, very bright colours, which of course the Impressionists liked. A lot of pattern work in the woman's dress there. That sort of orangey, light orange brown works well with the white and blue stripes, I think. And then of course we've got the horizontal stripes of the matelot sitting alongside it. There's a lot going on in this painting. There's the village in the background there. They could be on a lake, or well, I think we'll assume they're on a lake probably. It looks too wide for a river. Doesn't matter, does it? But there's an awful lot. It's a busy painting, and of course it benefits from seeing it in the flesh, as it were, because it's so large. Boating, another painting where he's used bright colours again. And again, her dress is just suggested by very sharp, fast strokes of ultramarine and white, basically, with a little bit of brown. I'm not sure what brown, but some sort of brown in there. And the hat is painted very quickly as well, just a suggestion of the bonnet there with a veil. That was painted in 1874. Then again, an impressionist style again, surely. Monet, painted Monet and his wife on his floating studio. So we know that Monet had this floating studio, and there's Monet painting. Not quite sure why he had why he needed to be afloat to paint, but there we are. It got him about the waterways, I suppose, at Argenteuil maybe. And then the Monet family in their garden. There's Monet doing a little bit of deadheading, probably, a couple of chickens there, and Monet's son lying against his mother. Actually, Renoir painted a very similar. He painted the same scene, in effect, and he didn't paint Monet in it. So with the Renoir, and I haven't reproduced it here for you to see, but the Renoir is basically, if I put a square around her, it's the same pose and done in equally impressionistic style. From 1877, he concentrated, Manet that is, concentrated on genre paintings. This painting is called Plum Brandy, as you can see. And I can't help but make the comparison with Degas' Absinthe Drinker. There's Manet's, which is much more positive, colourful, bright painting. And she's got a more expressive, museful expression, I think, on her face, whereas the Absinthe Drink is down in the dumps and looking particularly miserable and bewailing perhaps her lot in life, which has brought her to a dependency on drink, perhaps. So there we've got drink dependency, but in Manet's painting, we don't get any sense that she's dependent on this drink. She's simply out of an evening, sitting in a bar, enjoying a plum brandy. At the cafe is another painting of modern suburban life, full of colour, vivacity, positive painting. impressionist in style, surely. And this is my favorite Manet painting of them all, Aberystwyth, not easy to say, Aberystwyth, I suppose. He painted the son of the owner of the cafe. Now, this cafe is actually the Café Edouard, and it became the headquarters of what was known as La Banda Manet. So Manet's gang seemed to use this as their headquarters, this particularly cafe. He painted the son of the owner, that's this gentleman here, this model here is not the original model. She failed to turn up for the third sitting, apparently, and we're told that an enraged Manet promptly sacked her on the spot and used this lady instead, who we're also told is related to Offenbach. They're not quite sure how, distantly probably, I suppose. What I like particularly about this painting, and again, it's an impressionist painting by any standards of criticism, is the color of his shirt, and I love the way that it's reflected in his face, and then you follow it round his arm, around her chair, and then these yellows disappear into the chair itself. They become sort of chrome yellows and gold burnishings, maybe raw sienna, I suppose, is mixed in there. And all that contrasts with this pillar, this light green pillar, which sort of stabilizes the whole painting, I think, because it's painted in a flat way there, and there's no other suggestion of the framework that it's involved with. So it may be a canopy or something. We just don't know. The rest of the painting, of course, is we just get the impression of the tree there and the foliage, and then something's going on there. A bar, it could be. There could be glasses there. Could be somebody at a bar. What I really like, I like this painting of the waiter there. Now, what is going through that waiter's mind as he looks on? Is he thinking to himself, "Well, that's the son of the boss, up to no good again, philandering with the customers"? I don't know, but there's certainly, he's not just standing there waiting for an order. I don't think there's something going on in his mind, and he looks to me as though he's not too happy about the way things are shaping up in this painting. But what I really like about this painting is the colours. I'll leave you to look at that a little more. In 1877, he painted his idea of Nana. Nana was a character out of his friend Zola's, of his novels, Zola's novels, L'Assommoir, and the novel called Nana. So this is Manet's impression of her. The Salon rejected it on moral grounds. Well, she was a prostitute, wasn't she? In 1879, he painted the corner of a café concert. Café concert was we saw a lot of café concerts when I did the talk on Toulouse-Lautrec. Basically a club, a drinking club, where there was entertainment was going on, and here we can see quite clearly the stage in the background and a performer on the stage, and there's a suggestion of a double bass there, so, and even a trombone there, I think, and maybe a tuba there. So that's the orchestra pit right in front of the stage, and then in the foreground, of course, we've got the audience, or represented by these two gentlemen, and then the waitress. She's holding two. I mean, in the German Bierstubers, you see these maids, these waitresses. They can hold up to 4 or 5 Steiners of beer. She's got 2 in her hand there. She's serving. But you can see how this painting leaves Manet open to the criticism of it being unfinished, because surely he's painted the waitress's dress first, And then he's painted this character on top of it, but he hasn't bothered to come back, or it appears that he hasn't bothered to come back and fill in, block in the rest of the back of the shirt or chemise or whatever he's wearing, smock or whatever he's wearing there. So you can see her clearly through. This should be blocked out, surely. So, and we've got to say that he was quite happy to leave it like that. Else it wouldn't have taken him much effort to have filled in and finished off his character there. So we've got no explanation for that. But you can certainly see how he lends himself open to that criticism. In the last years of Manet's life, he took a new studio in the Rue d'Amsterdam, and that was the place to be seen in. He was adored by women and much loved by his friends, but almost as though he lived with the premonition of an early death, he painted impatiently, and his nudes became sketchy and rushed. This is blonde with bare breasts. As you can see, we don't need to be told that, I suppose, but it is the impression, and I use the word in a slightly different sense, but the impression certainly is that it was painted very quickly, in the impressionist style, of course, and he can't get out of the habit, it seems to me, of outlining his flesh with dark outlines there and also around there as well, in order to make it stand out. And this is a pastel, actually, woman fastening her garter, painted in 1879, towards the end of his life. Is a rather large pastel, 19 by 22. I think I quite like the impressionist way that he's done the wallpaper. Just a few quick strokes, no attempt really to create the pattern, but yet there it is, it works, doesn't it? Yet Manet leaves the world behind, perhaps at the height of his achievements, the year after completing probably his most iconic painting, a bar at the Folies-Bergere, which hangs in the Courtauld Institute in London. I've seen this painting many times, I'm sure many of you have as well. The barmaid was called Suzanne, and the man on the right, you see his reflection there in the mirror, is Henri Dupré. It's a painting steeped in the ideas of reflection and transience. Only the barmaid is painted full on. The rest of the world is depicted in the mirror, as though unreal, illusory, insubstantial. And again, we have this problem with Manet and perspective. I think you'd probably agree that the reflection isn't quite right, not positioned quite right there, as it would be if he was painting from life. She just seems to be a little bit too far to the right of the painting from the point of view of the perspective. But what it does do, of course, is it makes the center, the barmaid, it makes her the absolute focus of this painting. And she's got a glazed look in her expression, as though she's a million miles away, maybe in the lavender fields of Provence, maybe where she came from, I don't know. But she looks to be miles away. She's certainly not paying much attention to Monsieur Dupré and his order. We'd assume he's giving his order, or maybe something else is going on there. We just don't know. It's a painting that benefits greatly from seeing it actually seeing it hung in the Institute there. Much as the Google reproductions do their best, they cannot. And you get several versions of this on Google, and I try and pick out the best one each time, but they somehow seem to let me down. In the following year, 1883, Manet's left leg became gangrenous, possibly as a result of syphilis, and had to be amputated. He died a few months later at the age of only 50. His father, the eminent judge, and we saw a portrait of him right at the beginning of the tour, had also died of tertiary syphilis, which was quite common among bourgeois Parisian men in those days. I make no further comment about that. Degas was heard to say on leaving his graveside, he was greater than he thought. And Manet is buried in Passy Cemetery in Paris, and that is his grave. For all it's said that he wasn't, strictly speaking, an impressionist painter and didn't want to be part of the new movement, I believe that basically his paintings bear the stamp of impressionism. They paved the way for the impressionists, and it's easy to see why the impressionists looked to him for leadership. He was an innovator, a trailblazer, but at the end of the day, Manet, Edouard Manet, was his own man.